Welcome back to the Champagne on Ice podcast presented by the Field of 68. And boy, it was a awful night for Illinois at the State Farm Center on Saturday in multiple regards, not just the disastrous finish to the game on the floor, but also the botched jersey ceremony at halftime. It's now the curse of the upside down jersey, I guess, because that second half sure was an abomination for this Illinois team as Michigan State comes into Champaign and in a game where Illinois led by 16 in the first half, gets out of there with a 14-point victory, sweeps the season series over Illinois. Illinois misses their final 19 shots of the game, doesn't score a point, actually scores negative 2 points in the last 8 minutes and 29 seconds of the game because a goaltending got overturned. And it is a bad situation right now as a lot of the same issues we've seen offensively for Illinois spring up yet again in what is almost certainly the most disappointing loss of the Illinois season so far. We will talk about all of that. Also, are going to preview Illinois' upcoming game with Wisconsin with a guest. A friend of ours is going to jump on the show and talk some Wisconsin hoops later on. But for now, I am Kyle Tausk, joined as always by Mike Farmer. And Mike, what the hell did we watch on Saturday night? What in the world happened?
I have no idea because you come into the game, Terrence is coming back, Kofi just came back. It was a rocking atmosphere to start the game. Everything was going right for Illinois on the court as well. And then just a switch was flipped, and all of a sudden Illinois is putting up their worst offensive performance we've seen this year, probably, at least in the second half. Just nothing happening. Couldn't make a shot, especially at the end. And then not even that, but the poor rebounding, kind of getting out toughed by Michigan State on your home court on such a big night in such a big game in terms of the Big Ten and everything. It's just disappointing. Like, we'll get into some more details later, obviously, but I think you just got to say it was disappointing because that's what it was. Like, Illinois did not look like the team that we've grown to expect from Brad Underwood, especially over the past 5 years. And yeah, just super disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was kind of it in terms of I was kind of starting to buy back in a little bit after the Minnesota and UCLA wins because it felt like, okay, you've got your big three is really coming together now, playing really well. Offensively, it felt like there was an identity shift a little bit to playing more inside out, and Illinois had more success in the paint. They had two of their best offensive performances of the season in those two games, and you get a big home win on Tuesday night against UCLA. Now you come across this really difficult finish to the schedule, and I thought maybe there was a chance that Illinois was going to finally put it together and maybe go on a little late season run here. That's it after Saturday night. I mean, that's it. That was the chance to really build some momentum. You're at home against a team that beat you in a very frustrating performance for many reasons in East Lansing. There's revenge on your mind. I mean, Tom Izzo comes in there a win away from breaking the Big Ten wins record on your floor, and you take a 16-point lead. The atmosphere is incredible. It's Terrence Shannon night. You got the place buzzing. Illinois plays awesome basketball for the first 12 minutes of the game, and then it's a total disaster. And on your home floor, you let Michigan State close the game on a 15-0 run. The same problems we've seen offensively in terms of the three-point reliance and the terrible shot selection down the stretch. Nobody steps up and takes control of the game. None of your young guys, none of your veterans take control of the moment late in the game, and they just let Michigan State punk you for the final 10, 12 minutes of that game. Like you said, it wasn't just the offensive drought. It was offensive rebounds. It was getting cooked to the rim by Michigan State's guards. It was Jackson Kohler having the best game of his career, 23 points and 10 rebounds. And it was just a total implosion from Illinois. And for me, that's it. I mean, in terms of believing in this team and feeling like you actually really have something here, I just don't see it. I don't think I can see it anymore after that, because that's just one of those moments that doesn't happen to a team that has goals and aspirations of making a deep run and of being towards the top of the Big Ten. You can't let that happen on your home floor against a Michigan State team that had been struggling. It is extremely discouraging to see. And of course, the biggest frustration is the offensive finish. Oh, for your last 19 is embarrassing straight up. And the way it happened, it wasn't just, okay, Illinois just went ice cold and nothing went right. It was really, really bad shot selection, bad execution, a bad approach, a lack of adjustments offensively in terms of another really poor night from three. Nobody can buy a three after the first 5 minutes when Jake Davis hit a couple. And there's just bad shots. There's one sequence in the game where Illinois gets 3 shots on a possession, and it's a pull-up KJ3 brick, Tomislav Ivicic offensive rebound, kick out to Benham Rickhouse brick, another offensive rebound, KJ pull-up 3 brick, 3 missed threes on the same possession. And against a team like Michigan State, who you know wants to push and wants to run, those missed threes are killer because then you're at a disadvantage on the other end. And and Illinois was having success in the paint. Merez Johnson was cooking. Will Riley and Merez Johnson had a little high-low game working in the second half there. 3 or 4 times they went to it. Merez was dominating. Kasparis was cooking early in the game, and all of it went away. All of it went out the window. Just a terrible plan of attack down the stretch of the game, and that pretty much is the nail in the coffin for my belief in this team long term. I think you just can't have that happen on your home court.
I think a lot of people are with you. I think a lot of people have had that same sentiment for a couple weeks now, just based on the shooting and the late game implosions. That has to be talked about. Every single time this team has a lead or is trying to come back in a game, the final 8 minutes roll around and they just turn into a high school JV team for some reason. But yeah, like I think I am with you in terms of giving up, nail in the coffin type game last night. But at the same time, like the first half, they're up 16 points on a top 20 Michigan State team. If you can just replicate that and not go back and fall back to the bad habits of chucking threes, getting killed on the glass, the poor turnovers, and just a lack of offense, really, you have something there. You have a top 10 pick. You might have a top 20 pick. But yeah, I am with you. We just have not seen that for extended periods of time. Even from game to game, from half to half, it's night and day. Like sometimes it's beautiful, and you go up 16 on Michigan State. Other times, I mean, they close on a 15-0 run to end the game on your home court. So there's just no, like, you can't have any faith in this team. You can say, yeah, when they're at their ceiling, are they one of the top 10 teams in the country? Yeah, sure. But we're seeing that for 4 minutes of a 40-minute game once every 3 games. So like you can't have any faith. And that kind of just sums it up. There was a really similar experience as the 2022-2023 team, not just in terms of shooting, but saying, when Jaden Epps and Coleman and TSJ, Matt Meyer, when they're going, this team's really scary. It's a really good offense when they're going. It's the same case with this year's team. When Hummerkaus is actually hitting shots and not going 0 for 6, when Will Riley is doing his thing, when KJ and Tommy are on together, it looks phenomenal at times. But then you see the final 25, 30 minutes of this game, and it's, yeah, like, I mean, what the hell am I even watching? So, yeah, it's been the same kind of story, minus the UCLA and Minnesota games where they actually did switch up the game plan. It's been the same kind of story that we've seen for a month now. And yeah, last night was just an embarrassment.
That's really what it is, too, what you alluded to there. The inconsistency isn't just game to game, it's within games. I mean, this team can play really good 10-minute stretches of basketball where they look unbeatable. And in the same game, there can be a 10-minute stretch. We saw 2 of them this week. UCLA nearly erases a 16-point deficit in 4 minutes. And you were lucky if Kasparis didn't hit a circus step back. UCLA has a possession to tie or take the lead in that game. And then in this game, you play a phenomenal first 12 minutes, and then the rest of the game, and especially the final 8 minutes, it looks like a total disaster. And that's really where there's no question that this team has the ability and the talent to be a really good basketball team. But it's February 16th now as we record this, and we haven't seen that consistently even over the course of an entire 40 minutes other than a couple times against Oregon and Minnesota, really, or maybe Arkansas you throw in there in November. I mean, it's half to half. It's 8 minutes to 8 minutes that this team just completely flips how they look, what their approach is, the decision making. Obviously, the shot making and efficiency can run hot and cold, but it's been really cold here, and it hasn't felt like a consistent enough effort to change what they're doing and to keep going to what works and to put that dagger blow into a team when you are playing well. It's always foot off the gas. You fall back into the bad habits. Team gets back into the game, and there's just no trust that you can have in this team. Of course, there's always the potential for this team to play really good basketball, and there's enough talent on this team for it to happen. At this point, you can't possibly have any trust in this team doing it, let alone for 2-3 games in a row in the NCAA tournament. How about 2 halves in a row in the same game against a good team who you're going to see almost nightly the rest of the season? It's just, I don't know how you can have any belief or trust in what this team can put forward right now, because it was just so staggering to see everything completely flip in that game. And really, it started in the first half because you led 31-15, and then Michigan State cuts it to 4 at halftime because of some bad shot selection, because of some turnovers and lazy offensive play. And then Illinois found something early in the second half, and it felt like, okay, things are getting going again. And then the final 8 minutes happens, which I think was probably the most disheartening 8 minutes of the season in the way it happened, and just the stunning fashion in which you just saw clank after clank and Michigan State build a 14-point lead on you. It was really bad towards the end of last night, and I just think this team is lacking direction, lacking leadership, and I think the newness and the youth is probably too much to overcome for this team at this point, because you just don't have that veteran steadying presence like you had on last year's team, and you don't have a consistent approach and plan of attack that you can go to.
Yeah, I was going to ask you kind of what you think is going on when this team goes from 31-15 lead, and then all of a sudden it's the worst offense you've ever seen. Like, do you think it is, you alluded to it with the combination of poor shot selection, some really bad turnovers here and there, and then just a lack of leadership and youth. Like, a lot of people have been talking about it because last night was so drastic and the fall off of how the team looked pretty much. What do you think it is? If you had to like pinpoint one thing, is it just a lack of veterans, which I think has to be talked about more, especially considering one of your veterans is a DNP every night for whatever reason. One of them's a transfer from NAIA I don't know how much of a leader he really is. And then I think Boswell's just been kind of disappointing this year if we're being real. So yeah, like I just don't understand how you go from looking so good, the offense is clicking in pretty much every way, and then all of a sudden it's just a night and day difference of this team looking terrible. So can I get your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of a lot of things, but I do think there's a lack of like a leader on this team, of a true like alpha. And I wanted it to be Kasparis, but he's an 18-year-old point guard. He was atrocious in the second half of this Michigan State game. Took terrible shots, created nothing for teammates. It's just not a guy that has shown that he's going to be that, calming, steadying, hey, follow me guys, I'm going to lead this team to where it needs to go. And I mean, he's young. He's an 18-year-old, or maybe just turned 19. Like he's a freshman. That's really hard to put on a freshman lead guard. And you knew that coming into the season. You got your best players right now are young guys who haven't been a part of Brad Underwood's program, haven't been a part of Big Ten basketball. Your veterans just don't really have that quality to them. You don't have the Ty Rodgers and the Luke Goody and just some of these guys that had the leadership that you saw on the floor in huddles and in just steadying everybody and getting on guys and just, I don't know. I just don't think player-wise there's that defined guy or a presence within that huddle that can really get things right. And I also think, look, after every loss like this, you scroll through Twitter and it's let's fire Brad Underwood. Here we go again. It hasn't been a very good coaching job this year, in my opinion. And I think that's okay to say, with also acknowledging that Brad Underwood's a really good basketball coach. There's just not a lot of direction coming from the sideline either. I mean, there is something that needs to be hammered home in a young group like this. And I mean, Brad's such a numbers guy. This staff is such an analytically driven staff. They built this team on that, playing the numbers game, saying, hey, we want to have high-level spacing, high-level shooting, and we want to play a lot of five-out stuff, take a lot of threes, and try to win the analytics game. The analytics are telling you that's terrible for this team right now. 33 threes in a 40-minute game and 16 threes in the final 12 minutes. That's not winning anything. I mean, that's just a playing to your weaknesses. And we saw how much success Illinois had. I mean, you had 30 points in the paint at the 13-minute mark of the second half, score 0 to close the game. I mean, that is at some point comes back down to a coaching thing too, a lack of adjusting offensively, a lack of driving home what the strengths of this team have been and what had been working. It's just it's a lot of different things, but I just think this team is pretty poorly constructed right now to what they're ultimately good at, and I think it was a miscalculation of what this team's strengths were, how the offense was designed, and it is hard to completely shift in February how you built a team, how you've coached a team all off season, how you've practiced all year offensively to just say, okay, we're scrapping that. We're completely changing everything that we do, all of our principles, what we want to do offensively. It's not all just like, well, it'd be so easy to do that. It's horrific that this coaching staff doesn't have that happening. But at some point, you do have to shift, and I just think this team is struggling to fully realize that. And I don't know. It's a younger, newer team that I think just isn't really on the same page most of the time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I've been the biggest Brad Underwood defender in Illinois media. Like I love the guy. I think he's a phenomenal coach. I think his staff's great. After all these losses, you see that Tyler Underwood needs to be relegated to water boy takes as if that guy didn't lead. I mean, 11 months ago, we have a top 10 offense in Ken Palm history. Like, can we just let's relax a little bit? But I am starting to agree with lack of Brad, like in-game adjustments, all that BS that we usually hear, starting to make a little bit more sense. Like, it is just a press conference, but last night's press conference, there was a lot of, I wish I had answers for that from Brad Underwood. Just a lot of like kind of just, he's not really saying much. And like, you are the one guy that probably should have an answer to why you're shooting 7 for 33 from three and the offense is falling apart in the final 30 minutes. So that kind of, that rubbed me the wrong way, I guess. But yeah, it's just like, I think the youth has to be talked about more, as I said, because when your supposed big three is an 18-year-old reclass, and then obviously Tommy's 21, but it's his first year of college basketball. There's going to be a lot of mistakes. There's going to be a lot of inconsistencies, and I just think like you need more from the veteran group. As much as last podcast and the podcast before that, I'm saying these guys need to be in role player positions, like coming off the bench, not taking as many shots. I still stand by that, but you have to have some leadership, some assertiveness in huddles. Like KJ, in the KJ got asked last night in the press conference about like when you guys are huddled up, like who's kind of leading that, what's going on, and he's like, yeah, I don't know, I kind of have to be better initiating the offense, and it's like, all right, we have one of the most like expensive rosters, we have lottery picks, we have top 10 guys, we have great transfers, and it's just not really working, and nobody really has answers for what's going on. So I am starting to agree with the just I don't know, having a little bit of just kind of questioning what the staff's doing, what Brad's doing, what's going on in practices and huddles, because it's really not making sense, and it's kind of it's looking like a replica of the team we saw 2 years ago. And after that season, you had Coleman and other guys coming out saying, "Yeah, we made promises to these people, and the locker room wasn't really where we needed it to be." I don't know if you have that this year, but just the on-court results are staggeringly similar to that team 2 years ago. So it is really disappointing. And of course, we're talking about this after maybe the most disappointing loss of the season. But I mean, people have been saying these things for months, and it's really just, I don't know, it came to a head last night, and really disappointing, especially with the Terrence thing, having one of your best players in program history come back. The jersey's upside down. I mean, come on. So yeah, just a really bad night. And I don't think anybody's too optimistic about how the way the rest of the season's shaping up to be, especially with this gauntlet of a schedule coming up.
Yeah, that was the omen of all omens when that jersey got unveiled upside down. It's like, okay, I mean, there's no way you actually win after that, right? It's such a bad omen to see that, and sure enough, now maybe it's a full blown curse after that because Illinois played probably their worst stretch of basketball of the season. But I agree with you. Yeah, it's becoming dangerously close to replicating that 22-23 team. I mean, there's a lot of similarities there. I agree. I think this is a good locker room. From everything I've heard and seen and what the players have said, there were so many warning signs. You had guys leaving midseason. You had, all the Matthew Meyer with his monster stuff. You had, Jaden Epps had off-court stuff going on. Like, that was a messed up locker room that didn't have a lot of chemistry to it. I don't think that's the case with this team. I just think in terms of, yeah, the results, the youth, the inexperience, just a approach that doesn't fit the roster. If you remember that team 2 years ago, awful 3-point shooting team, took a lot of threes and were very stubborn about it. Took bad shots late in games, struggled late in games. That team at least had a Terrence Shannon Jr. who down the stretch of the season did take over late in some games and when nothing else was working. Kasparis really hasn't been that guy enough. Now he has, UCLA, he made some big shots late, and he's made some shots late in the game, but he hasn't even been to Terrence's level that last year in terms of like a closer and a leader. But yeah, that team, the conversation all year with that group was, well, man, if this team could just put it together, that ceiling is so high. There's a lot of talent here. But all year long, it was, okay, maybe they're figuring it out, letdown loss. Okay, there's some positive signs. 6 for 40 from three, letdown loss. That team lost at home 3 or 4 times. This team's already lost 4 home games. That's another conversation to have. What in the world is going on with the fact that Illinois can't win a big home game where the talking points coming in are like, oh, the atmosphere is going to be phenomenal. This is a huge home spot for Illinois. Illinois has lost almost all of those since Io DeSunmu was here. And I don't have an answer for that, but it's getting pretty close to that 22-23 team. And at some point you are who your record says you are. And this Illinois team now is just not you've lost 9 games and you've lost 7 games in conference. At some point you're a 17-9 basketball team, and the great moments and the good wins and all that stuff, you got to win games consistently. Illinois won back-to-back games one time in over a month, and has now lost 6 times since January 11th. Like, that's just a team that's probably an 8-9 seed type of team that, yeah, I'm sure when the bracket comes out in March, there'll still be some people that say, well, if Illinois wins that first round game, they could give the 1 seed a run if they just put it together. How did that 22-23 team finish? They played terribly, lost in the first round. Like, I don't know. Again, anything can happen in March and late in the season when you have the talent that Illinois has. But again, it's a trust thing and it's a vibes thing to where do you really expect this team to put multiple good performances together in the NCAA tournament when you haven't seen it for a month and a half? Like, at some point you got to do it on the court. And this team has proven time and time again that they can't.
Yep, that's pretty much it. I mean, we've been saying the same talking points for almost 2 months now in terms of, like you just said, when this team's at their ceiling, really scary. They haven't been at that ceiling. Apart from the Indiana first half, the Oregon game, we have not seen that ceiling. Granted, that ceiling is incredibly high, but we haven't really seen anything close to that in quite a while. So, yeah, just a lack of trust in this team, which is obviously warranted based on everything we've seen. Um, can we get a vibes check on Trey White and Dre? Like, I was listening to our guys, the Field of 68 with John Fanta and Doster. Fanta brought up a good point saying, like, like Illinois is kind of short in the rotation. Obviously, there were injuries and illnesses and all that stuff, but they've kind of shortened the rotation to 7 guys in the hopes that they become a better 3-point shooting team because you kind of get rid of 2 poor 3-point shooters in Dre and Trey. If you're shooting 7 of 33 and 4 of 29 in the final like 35 minutes of the game, do you really need that lineup? Like, I love Jake Davis. Jake Davis is a great player. He's been a bright point of the past couple months, and I think he should get minutes. But like, you don't think Trey White and Dre can give you any spark in terms of getting into the paint and getting back to what this team's actually pretty good at, which is driving downhill and creating off of that? And then defensively, you're getting picked apart by Holloman and Fears, just getting dominated in the mid-range game. You don't think Trey White and Dre can give you anything in terms of positional size, perimeter defense, like can give you a spark off the bench? Trey White was averaging 25 minutes a game and almost 10 points per game. Is he sick? I mean, he's getting DNPs in February. That's insane. He started every single game for the first 18, 20 games, whatever it was. And he's the 10th man on the bench getting Kerry Booth type minutes. So I'm confused. I want to hear your thoughts on this. We did just talk about it, but like, the press conference, I think it was Joey Wagner was saying, the rotation's kind of settled. Like, it's been a couple games, couple weeks since the flu bug hit everybody. Like, the rotation's kind of, is it set in stone? And Brad's like, No, not at all. So like I don't know. It's been a couple games and we haven't seen two of our top 7 or 8 contributors. They're just wasting away on the bench. So I'm confused. I'm not calling for Trey and Dre to be playing 20, 25 minutes a game like they were, but it's confusing. Like when this team needs a spark and they've scored 31 points in the final, like I think it was 28 minutes of the game. You don't want to switch anything up. You just want to continue to shoot and miss your last 19 shots, 13 of those being threes. I don't know. It was confusing to me.
It is really weird to have a guy in Trey White who started every game, and he was up and down. I mean, he had a nice stretch there in early January, but to be fair, before he got sick, he was
He was bad.
not a huge factor. He had 13 rebounds against Nebraska. I thought that was a pretty good performance. Other than that, he hadn't been doing a whole lot. And obviously, the 3-point shooting from him is just not going to be there. Like you said, though, I mean, it's this team isn't good
It's
at
there
shooting
for
threes with the
nobody.
lineup they have. So it's just weird. Part of me feels like there's got to be something else going on, whether it's as simple as just whatever bug got to Dre and Trey really took it out of them, and you lost weight, and you struggle to get back. And Brad Underwood is really hesitant to throw them into a physical Big Ten game until he feels like they're 100% back. Maybe that's it. Although we have seen Dre at least play a few minutes here and there, which tells me he's at least available. And, Trey White hasn't been on the injury report at all. Brad Underwood was asked on Friday before the Michigan State game and basically alluded to, when answering a question about Trey White, saying, we're kind of shrinking the rotation. We're going to play the guys that are give us the best chance to win. And that, he basically, without straight up saying it, said, like, I don't think Trey White's good enough to play right now on this team. He was good enough for a while. And I understand the idea of, like, okay, the best version of Illinois' offense is when you can maximize spacing and when you can get your best shooters on the floor, even if you're not making shots at a high rate. And that doesn't mean that you should be taking 30 plus of them and settling for the shots that Illinois did. But even if you are going to play inside out, which was working for Illinois against Minnesota and for a lot of that UCLA game, and even if you are going to emphasize attacking the paint and trying to play out of the paint, that lineup is still probably your hardest to guard lineup because you have the shooting threats on the floor. But man, like you said, I mean, you can't score for the final 8.5 minutes of the game. You completely go away from attacking, getting to the rim. Two guys that can do that pretty dang well, Trey White, Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn, have shown that they can attack, they can finish, they can get to the free throw line, and those guys aren't playing. While, Benham Rickhouse, I get that Brad really trusts him. At some point, like, he's 0 for 6 from 3 in the game. And I did think that he was playing a lot better. Even in the first half against Michigan State, I thought he was active on the glass, got to some of that booty ball mid-range stuff that he was hitting. But the guy was a non-factor in the second half. He was recruited to this team to knock down threes, went 0 for 6 from 3 in a crucial game down the stretch. And he's done that more than a few times this year where he's just missed shots and that he was recruited here to make. And in terms of the evaluation of him being a knockdown three-point shooter, doesn't look like that was the correct one at this point. And when Kylan Boswell is going to disappear from a game, which, draws back flashbacks of last year at Arizona for him down the stretch where he just was a complete non-factor for them towards the end of the season in most games. He couldn't be seen out there. I mean, he made zero impact in that game in 29 minutes. And I know he got a cut above his eye that he probably needs stitches on, but even before that, he had taken one shot in the game. Tomislav Ivicic is having his worst game as an Illini. Like, yeah, you probably could use a little bit more of just some different things infused in the rotation. I'm curious to see what happens there. I alluded to on our last episode that it made some sense to shorten the rotation. I still really, was hoping that Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn wasn't going to be a cut. I understood it for Trey White a little bit more just because of the fact that he hadn't been very consistent and he was such a non-shooting threat. But I'm very curious because it does feel like, based on that answer Brad gave last night and based on what's happened here and based on the fact that you just aren't getting consistent enough play from Kylan and Ben, I'm curious to see if all of a sudden Tuesday at Wisconsin, Trey White's like starting again, or, at least the rotation is lengthening, because I think the idea of shortening a rotation towards the end of the season is a good one if you have a clear-cut top of your rotation. I don't think Illinois has that. You have a clear-cut top few guys, Caspers, Will, Tommy, Merez. Beyond that, like, what has anybody else proven to say, okay, these guys are who we're going to ride with as the top 6 or 7 in our rotation? I don't think Trey or Dre have any less say on that than Kylan, Ben, or Jake Davis do. So I'm curious to see what happens there because it is very weird.
Yeah, and speaking of Wisconsin, Trey White dominated Wisconsin a couple months ago. I think Trey and Kylan combined for like 40 points, 10 rebounds, and 8 assists or something. I don't think we're going to be seeing that this time around. But yeah, it's just weird to me. Like there was a stretch, I think, over or spanning the end of the first half and the start of the second half, where Illinois' only points came from KJ free throws. I think 2 Merez like dunks or layups, and then a Jake Davis layup. There was just nothing happening. Absolutely nothing happening. Although they were trying to get the ball into the paint, which is why they had those layups and free throws. But then after that, I mean, it was disastrous offensively. So going forward, we can talk about the rotation. I mean, we just did. We can talk about all that leadership on court and offensively. Do you think there's a fix? Because I mean, we saw the concerted effort against Minnesota, who granted is not as good as Michigan State or these teams we're about to be playing. We saw the effort to take 16 threes, only take the threes when they're wide open and in the flow of the offense. And they looked really good. Like that second half, KJ and Will were going back and forth, getting to the getting to the rim at will and just doing what they wanted, looking like top 20 picks, looking like lottery picks. UCLA was more of the same, not as much. Like they found the 3-point shot a little bit more than they did against Minnesota, but it looked really good. Like Tommy was phenomenal. KJ was really good. Will was pretty good once again. And then it's the same thing for the first 10 minutes against Michigan State. Like Merez had the 2 big plays in transition, getting dunks. KJ got downhill really well. Will came in and was pretty good. Tommy didn't do much, but like overall, Jake Davis came in and hit threes when he needed to and when they were pretty open. But then, yeah, just after that, you start to get some turnovers. You start to get some rushed shots. The offense is kind of just, I don't know, like not much happening for the first 20, 25 seconds and then kind of force into a bad shot. I just don't know. Is it as simple as going back and saying, yeah, let's take 16 to 23s in this game. Take them only if they're wide open. Yeah, you're not going to get the best looks in the paint then because the other team's going to sag off probably and I don't know, play tough defense in the paint. But like it was working with Merez. It was working with KJ for the first 12 minutes of the game. And we've seen that in the past couple games too. And then they just go away from it. So it's the same thing with the Trey and Dre and Brad not having answers. I don't get it. You can point to the youth and it's tough to switch up your game plan once you're in mid-February and you've been playing different basketball from November to January, but they're college kids, like they're D1 athletes in the Big Ten, the high major players, lottery picks, really good transfers, high recruits out of high school. Like, I don't know. I think we've grown to expect better from this program and Brad Underwood coach teams. We saw such a good offense last year. We saw great offenses with Io. And we saw teams that could adapt and change as the season went on. We saw coaches that could change as the season went on and not be stubborn, as some people like to call Brad. But yeah, last night, it's tough talking about this the night after such a disappointing loss, but it has been disappointing the past month and a half. So that's my piece. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's like necessarily a number in terms of the 3-point shooting. Like, okay, if this team just takes 15 threes a game instead of 30, everything's going to be fine. It's just the quality of shot that they're getting and just, the ball movement offensively and actually getting into action offensively. KJ actually creating for other guys. 1 assist for KJ against Michigan State. It's just a guy that was taking step back 3, a pull up 3, not creating anything. Will Riley was the only guy creating for others. Him and Merez had it cooking there in the second half, little 2-man game, and Riley was actually reading and finding him under the rim. But, you don't have much creation on this offense, and it's just a lot of stagnant, bad shots. That was what, was so good about the Minnesota and UCLA games. It felt like a lot of the threes were good in rhythm shots that were being created off of inside out action, attacking the paint, kicking out to shooters, moving the basketball. The shots were open, in rhythm, catch and shoot looks. Yeah, KJ's still going to take some individual shots, but late in that game, it was KJ bad shot selection, Will Riley bad shot selection. Rickhouse and Tommy even like are taking threes with a guy in their face closing out. Tommy gets a three blocked because he has no separation, wants to take it anyway. Rickhouse, some of the threes he missed were wide open. Few of them were closely guarded. Those just aren't shots that need to go up. Put the ball on the ground. Try to create an advantage. Keep it moving. Get it back into your guard's hands. Just nothing happening offensively. No advantages being created and just bad shots settling. At some point, that's just kind of who the team is, and young guys being young guys. And I don't know if it's necessarily a thing that you can completely change in their mindset, but yeah, I do think coaching's a big part of that, and just emphasizing, not allowing that to dry up that much and saying, look, if you're going to take 3 straight bad shots in a row, even if it's Kasparas Jakučionis, who's probably your best player, you're going to come to the bench, and Brad Underwood is going to chew you out like he has in the past, which you just haven't seen that much this year, and he's going to put Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn in and tell Dre, hey, attack. We're not settling for this stuff anymore. At some point, I just think it's got to be hammered home somehow with this group, and the fact that that's just not acceptable to be settling for those types of shots, and the bad threes just can't happen anymore with this team. They didn't happen at all against Minnesota. You go 9 of 16 from 3, have your second best offensive game of the year other than Oregon. UCLA things dried up at times, but even then there were points in that game where it was just free-flowing offense, and I think at some point, it's a mixture of coaching but also self-awareness from the guys on the floor, and a mindset to be aggressive and to not settle for that type of stuff. I don't know how fixable it is because we've seen it for 3 months now, so I don't know. One last thing I want to touch on briefly before we talk Wisconsin, and we can be quick on this. Since that first Michigan State game, January 19th, Illinois 109th in defensive efficiency, according to Bart Torvik. And you've seen it happen. I mean, it hasn't been very good on that end of the floor. And you probably were good enough for most of that Michigan State game to beat them. But when you're struggling that much offensively and Michigan State's guards are torching you to the rim, Jackson Kohler has a career day. The defensive rebounding has dropped off here significantly recently. This is a top 10 defensive rebounding team in the country, and they've gotten eaten alive on the offensive glass at times here recently. And this team is really sliding on that end of the floor. How concerned are you about that, and what do you see there?
Definitely concerned. I mean, I didn't realize that number was that bad. What you said, 109th, like not even top 100. That's, pretty terrible. I really do think a lot of it comes down to youth, and the numbers were really good. They were great for the first couple months of the season, and they were great actually with that team 2 years ago. The super young team with freshmen, they played their roles. It wasn't a phenomenal team defensively, but they were really solid, and that kept them in some games when the offense was struggling. I think that was kind of the same thing this year a little bit for the first couple months of the year. But yeah, I think a lot of it's just freshmen. I think it's interesting when you shorten the rotation, as we've talked about. You go down to 7 guys. Guys are tired. Michigan State was able to take advantage of our tired guards because we have 3 guards on this team, and Dre's not playing. Trey's not a guard, but he's guarding a guy on the perimeter. He's not playing. So then it's just KJ and Boswell who are trying to do everything offensively, and then at the same time they're trying to stop some explosive guards and Fears and Holloman and Akins too. And yeah, I'm fine with them getting picked apart in the mid-range. That's kind of what Michigan State does. They're great at that against every team. But getting downhill and also letting Jackson Kohler go off and Carson Cooper bullying you on the boards when you have a great rebounder in Merez and a good rebounder in Tommy, it's just embarrassing. And like you said, it hasn't just been this Michigan State game. We've seen it at times. Ace Bailey cooking you, Dylan Harper cooking you. Going back in Nebraska, Bryce Williams was cooking you. Some of these losses, it's just not characteristic of what we've come to expect from Brad Underwood teams. And that's a point I made a while ago. And you said it this podcast too. Eventually, like your uncharacteristic mistakes that Underwood mentions in press conference, they're not uncharacteristic anymore. Yep. And we've played 24, 25 games this year. It's mid-February. We have 5 regular season games left, I believe. So yeah, it's been disappointing. The offense has been the talking point, but the defense has not fallen off a cliff, but it hasn't been pretty the past month. So yeah, and you got a deadly offensive team that you're going to have to play in Wisconsin, and then we know what Duke is, and you still have Michigan again. You have Purdue. It's scary. It's looking like a fall off that we saw from the defense last year when they just fell apart in the last couple months of the year.
Yeah, the mistakes that this team is making are very characteristic. Like
Yeah.
that's who this team is at this point. They're not, I mean, they're expected on a nightly basis. So at some point, yeah, it's not like, oh well, we were out of character tonight. Nah, pretty in character with some of the stuff that's going on. And yeah, let's jump right into it. You mentioned Wisconsin. Up next for Illinois, a matchup with the Wisconsin Badgers, who are a red hot basketball team right now. And to preview this Wisconsin team, we are going to be joined by a special guest, a good friend of ours, Brady Lang, whose camera is still off right now. There we go. There we go. Let's go.
Oh,
Brady Lang joining us now to talk some Wisconsin Badgers as Illinois won 9 in a row against this team, but if that streak was ever going to come to an end, it's going to be on Tuesday night with the way these two teams are headed. So what's up, Brady? Thanks for joining us.
not much. Wisconsin actually got a win at the Mackey Arena yesterday. Uh, doesn't happen very often if you look at Wisconsin's record there, or basically anyone's. But hopefully they can keep playing well.
Yeah, I mean,
John Tonje, shades of Johnny Davis at Mackey. That was insane.
The step back threes, not the most high quality shot, but for him, it might be.
I mean, I'll just ask you, like, how has this Wisconsin team done this? Because I know in the preseason, as usual with these Greg Gard teams, they're picked like 14th in the conference, and all of a sudden you look up and this might be the most dangerous team in the Big Ten heading into the tournament. I mean, they're the highest ranked team on Ken Pom in the Big Ten, one of the best offenses in the country, 94 points at Mackey Arena. You got two guys who are probably going to be on the top two teams of the all Big Ten team. I mean, how has this team done this? What's led to them becoming this good?
I think they were probably, well, obviously they were underrated by most people coming into the season, including myself. Uh, and they didn't really see the leaps that these guys were expected to take. John Tonje, obviously, he's averaged like 4 points or something last year at Missouri. He only played in a couple of games and was injured. Not many people really knew about him coming into the season, really. John Blackwell's obviously taken a huge leap. Nolan Winter's gotten better. Steven Kral's still there. He hasn't improved as much as the other guys, but he's getting better slowly. Max Klesmit, really, he's had a down year compared to his usual self. But then the bench is where things really change. This team has more depth than most teams in years past. Kamari McGee is shooting the ball unbelievably well. Carter Gilmore found out how to make a three-pointer over the offseason. He's doing consistently now. You've got Jack Janicki. He's a walk-on. He's scoring the ball. He had a huge game yesterday after McGee got ejected. And then everybody that plays can shoot the ball, and they can shoot it with confidence, and they can all make it. And they make it at a high level. That's probably their biggest strength.
That's the thing I've noticed with Wisconsin. Like, I'm watching games and I see the bench mob come in. It's like you said, Gilmore, Janicki comes in, and I don't know, you have Klesman in there maybe, and McGee, and it's like I don't know how this team's gonna like stay in this game and keep putting up points. And every single time they do, it's like Greg Gard's just it's a masterclass every year with him. And I think it's been beautiful this year with the whole rotation kind of just doing everything. You know, Tanje's the main guy, kind of the alpha dog, and Blackwell's been phenomenal. But like you got Winter and Crowell stretching the floor a little bit, and then the bench too. It's really fun to see from Wisconsin.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody can score it, which it was definitely not the case in years past. And everybody can stretch the floor. I mean, last year, Tyler Wall can't shoot the three. Last year, Carter Gilmore couldn't shoot the three. I mean, it was a little cluster when you had both those guys in there. And then there were different guys that weren't shooting it as high of level. Winter wasn't nearly as confident. I mean, he made them last year, but just not at a similar rate. Klesmit did make a lot more last year. He was one of their best shooters last year. And then last year, you also had AJ Stewart taking almost every shot. Now, how many of those are quality shots is another question. They did lose Hepburn, which, I mean, if they had him this year, it would be a whole different level. But Blackwell's done a very good job replacing him, even being considered like an off-ball guard. He's stepped into that role of being the true ball handler and facilitator, and he's done a great job.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this Wisconsin team and they, in a lot of ways, try to do what Illinois tries to do, but they actually make the shots to go with it. You look at this team, 14th in the country in three-point rate, but also shooting at 37% from three as a team. So that's probably going to be a welcome, well, unwelcome for Illinois fans, but a refreshing sight to see a bunch of shooters actually make some shots on Tuesday night. But really, I mean, it's those two guys, Tanji and Blackwell, who have really spurred this offense. And Tanji is making a late push for Big Ten Player of the Year. I mean, if Braden Smith wasn't probably going to get the popular media vote as the media darling, this guy actually has a pretty good case to win Big Ten Player of the Year, especially if Wisconsin finishes the season strong, averaging 19 points a game. He's got a little Terrence Shannon to his game just in terms of when he drives, he's so strong and physical. He'll just bulldoze three to the bucket, but can also hit shots. And then the leap that Blackwell has taken, he's a guy that is really effective around the rim, can spray it out. What do you say about just the way those two guys have carried this offense and how much they create for this team?
I mean, yeah, they do. They're the driving force for sure. Usually, if you're playing Wisconsin, you better have five guys that can defend. Otherwise, they'll pick out the matchup they want. And we saw that yesterday. They just went at Fletcher Lawyer continuously. And then they even went at Braden Smith. I mean, they would dribble it down till about 6 seconds left on the shot clock, then drive right by him and draw a foul at the end of the game, which is what you want to do when you're up by 8 with 2 minutes left. But those guys, yeah, they do everything well. They're good leaders. You don't really see any problems with them like you might on a top team. Usually, they just do everything well for them. I don't really know what else to say about them. They're just there. They just do everything.
Yeah, they're beasts. And I want to go back to the last time Wisconsin and Illinois matched up. I think it was early December, maybe. Wisconsin was kind of sliding. Illinois was playing pretty decent. And Illinois had home court advantage, obviously. Kind of limited Tanji, kind of limited Blackwell. Wisconsin still put up 80 points, but kind of extended the game, got that number up there. Do you think anything's changed since that matchup in terms of, you think Wisconsin has a better chance here than they did back a couple months ago? Do you think Illinois has fallen off a little bit, obviously, with their shooting woes and offensive struggles?
Yeah, I think outside of Tanjay and Blackwell, the rest of the team started to play a lot better, especially Stephen Crowell, who had 0 rebounds in that game, which if that happens again, they probably will lose again. So he's been playing a lot better. Winter's been more confident. McGee, he's been good all year. I mean, he hasn't really done. Klesmith started to play better as of late, so hopefully he can keep it going. And then again, I think Illinois has. I don't think they're the same team as when we saw them in Champaign. They can be on any given night. Like they were good against Minnesota, they were good against UCLA, but I think they shot pretty. How did they shoot in the game in Champaign, Illinois?
I think they were like about 30%.
Yeah, 10
on
for 33
attempts. Yeah,
the typical.
So yeah, I guess they're still not shooting well, but they out physical Wisconsin in that one. Hopefully Wisconsin's ready for that this time. And yeah, I think the guys around them have started to play a lot better than they were in that stretch.
What do you think about this Wisconsin team on the defensive end? Obviously, their offense has turned into one of the most efficient in the country and can really beat you from anywhere. There's not a lot of weaknesses there, especially when those two guys are playing well. But defensively, to me, it felt like Wisconsin really was struggling early in the year, was getting picked apart around the rim. And now you look in conference play, and they're the number 4 defense in terms of defensive efficiency. They've improved quite a bit on that end of the floor. They kind of do a lot of what Illinois does. They'll sit and drop and kind of force you into a lot of mid-range shots and not allow you to really even get to the rim. But Illinois obviously had some success offensively in that first matchup, but it has been a rocky road for the Illini on the offensive end. I'm just curious what you've made of Wisconsin's gradual defensive improvement and if there's any areas that would concern you the most going up against Illinois on Tuesday.
I think the area that concerns me the most against almost any team with this team is guarding the pick and roll. We saw it against Michigan a while ago. I mean, that's a different factor when you have 2 7-footers run the pick and roll. But even yesterday at the start of the game, it was pretty rough when we were watching. I know Purdue does that to everyone. They get open shots against everybody, especially with Braden Smith. But I think the pick and roll is what concerns me the most. And then, yeah, they got more physical down low again, is what kind of helped their defense compared to the start of the season. Steven Krause started to play more physically, which he needs to do. And then Carter Gilmore started to play a lot more, and he's a really good defender, which is what they needed down low.
Yeah, would you say those are kind of your keys to the game then? Because Illinois has just a dynamic pick and roll and pick and pop duo with KJ and Tommy. And then down low, of course, Merez is a beast coming off, or he's starting now and playing pretty significant minutes. Tommy's a pretty good matchup nightmare, I guess, down low as well. So would you say that's your key to the game? And then if you had some keys offensively for Wisconsin, let's hear them.
Yeah, I would say that would be definitely my defensive key to the game. Offensively, I mean, it's pretty simple. They got to make their open shots. They have to every game. You could probably say that for any team though, but they've been doing it all year. And when the game they didn't, which really sticks out, was the Michigan game, which is their only home loss of the season. They shot poorly from three, and they lost. So if they continue to make their open shots and get their open shots, which they have been all year, I think they should have a pretty good chance to win.
All right, should we do some predictions here for this game? Illinois has won 9 in a row against Wisconsin, dating back to early in 2020. After Wisconsin, I think, had won 15 in a row against Illinois before that, just beating up on Bruce Weber and John Gross and those early Brad Underwood teams. But if they're not going to break the streak on Tuesday night, I don't know when it's going to happen. This Wisconsin team is rolling. Illinois just didn't score for 8.5 minutes on their home floor against a struggling Michigan State team. I mean, this is the chance of chances for the Badgers to finally get over the hump against Illinois. I'll start with Brady, and then Mike and I can jump in. Is this finally the time that Wisconsin gets it done over Illinois?
I would think so. I think if they don't find a way to get it done on Tuesday, the streak might go on for the rest of my life. But yeah, I think I'll go with Wisconsin 82, Illinois 74.
Wow, okay. Yeah, when we previewed Wisconsin a couple months ago, I had a quote saying like there's never been a Wisconsin team that scared me, at least in the Brad Underwood era. I've thought Illinois was the better team pretty much every time they played, and the results have kind of showed that. This time around, my opinion has changed, man. This Wisconsin team is pretty much Illinois on steroids. Like, they make the open shots that Illinois misses. They are a better defensive team than Illinois. It's just a team effort every single night, pretty much. And so, yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think they put up 88. I'm saying Wisconsin 88. Illinois sticks in it, but Wisconsin 88-81 is my prediction.
One last thing to mention that we didn't touch on here is that Wisconsin is currently, if the season ended today, the best free throw shooting team in the history of NCAA basketball. I mean, that's pretty insane. That's another reason that offense is so good, because they're shooting 84% from the free throw line. I think their worst free throw shooter, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is shooting 75% among guys that actually like get there at any rate. So it's going to be an uphill climb for this Illinois team, especially with how bad Illinois has been on the defensive end here. I don't want to be guarding this Wisconsin offense right now, especially if some of the rotation things that have happened for Illinois continue. I think Wisconsin is primed to finally beat this Illinois team. With the way these two teams are trending, I think Wisconsin should score pretty easily, should get some open looks. Illinois, I do think offensively should have enough to, not get blown out. I think they'll be in the game, but Wisconsin with that free throw shooting will close things down at the end. I'll say Badgers 86, Illinois 80. There in Madison. Last thing before we end, I'm just curious from Brady's perspective as obviously a Wisconsin fan, but watches a lot of Big Ten hoops. What do you make of this Illinois team that was picked near the top of the Big Ten early in the season? Now they sit at 9-7 in conference, and it's just been a roller coaster ride of disappointing letdown losses and just inconsistent play. From a Wisconsin fan's perspective, what are just your general thoughts on this Illinois team and this Illinois season?
Be honest.
I think they still have a good basketball team down and deep inside of them. I think we saw it against Minnesota when they didn't shoot 33 3-pointers with guys who don't shoot the ball that well. If you look at it, Kylan Boswell is shooting way worse than he did last year. Rickhouse is shooting worse than he was last year. Is there more guys?
Almost everybody. I mean, pick a
Almost
guy.
everybody. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's also tough to bring a bunch of guys who have never played together before together and to play consistent basketball for a whole season. I don't know if that's really sustainable for every group. It can work sometimes, but it's not always going to work. But overall, I think they got to stop shooting 3-pointers, really, at this high of a rate. Obviously Minnesota, it's easier to get whatever you want against them compared to the top teams in the league. So probably not going to be able to do that to every team, obviously, but you don't need to shoot 35 3-pointers a night and shoot it at a bad clip.
You got anything else, Mike?
I don't know. I'm just looking at the schedule, and Wisconsin has a underdog sleeper chance at maybe a Big Ten title. They got I think it was Washington, Penn State still, Minnesota still, and obviously this Illinois game. But I don't know. They're getting hot at the right time. They got some home games still. You seeing that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mentioned that yesterday that I think they actually have a chance to share the Big Ten title because they're at 4 losses, and if they take care of Illinois on Tuesday at Michigan State's like the only really tough game left.
yeah. I mean, they should have a chance. It's at Michigan State's always tough, but Wisconsin, I think they've won 3 in a row there actually. I think this Michigan State team is better than the teams that they've beaten in those games, but I think this Wisconsin team's also better than the teams that have won there. I think this is Greg Gard's best team so far. Yeah, definitely.
How do you
But
go ahead? Sorry.
so I know that I think they have Illinois, Oregon, Washington, and Penn State at home, which Oregon's been struggling. Washington and Penn State are on the verge of missing the Big Ten tournament. And then I think they go to Minnesota and Michigan State. And then,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's really going to come up, you would think, to this Illinois and then at the Breslin Center. So they should have every chance. It's all in front of them. They're going to need some losses, I think, out of Michigan State outside of the Wisconsin game, I'm assuming, but their schedule.
Michigan too.
Yeah,
Michigan's got to lose probably 3 games still.
Yeah, that'll probably be what would prevent them from doing it if they went out. But Michigan State, I think they have a really tough schedule to end the season. Michigan twice, they got Wisconsin. I think they have Purdue on Tuesday. And
Yes. Yep. How do you feel about Wisconsin last thing heading into the NCAA tournament? Yeah, it's been since Greg Gard's first season that they made the second weekend, and you just mentioned there that this might just be Greg Gard's best team that he's had so far. What's your confidence level in this team truly being dangerous come March?
yeah, I think they were highly seeded with the Johnny Davis team, but this team's way more consistent. They're a better offensive team overall. They have way more weapons that are reliable. They're older. So I think this team, their consistency from shooting the ball has been honestly surprising. I know they're good shooters, but they haven't really had that many bad shooting games. Almost every team has multiple bad shooting games throughout the year. But this one, it's been a while since they've honestly had one. So obviously you could run into that in the tournament, which is always scary. But I think if there's a year to make a deep run, this might be the year to do it.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, good stuff. That should wrap things up for us. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Champagne on Ice. Subscribe to the Field of 68 Podcast Network YouTube channel. All of our episodes stream live there. Find us wherever else you get your podcasts. Thanks to Brady for joining us to talk some Wisconsin. We will be back sometime after that Wisconsin game, Mike and I, to break it all down, also preview what now is looking like a very daunting task against Duke next weekend. I'm not very excited to dive into that matchup with the way Illinois is looking, but we will do that next week as well. Until then, hope everybody enjoys the game on Tuesday. We will talk to you next time right here on the Champagne on Ice.